questions from other stakeholders. Apologies, I think we are just now joining the YouTube live stream. So those folks may have missed my opening announcements. That is okay. So I'll pick up where I was, which is the presentations, I think, are pretty hefty, and we have a number of staff questions. So if there is time following Pura staff questions, we will turn to other stakeholders for questions. If there is not time, you are of course welcome to follow up through the docket. Following the presentation and questions from the Connecticut Green Bank, we do have time for public comments. I just want to clarify that the public comments section of the agenda is for comments. So if we have folks who have not been recognized so far in the technical meeting and wish to provide a reaction to today's presentation or comments on the docket, that is an appropriate time to do so, but we will hold that time for comments. It is not an opportunity for additional questions. So with that, I want to thank everyone in advance for participating. We'll welcome to the virtual stage the joint presentation team from the Connecticut Light and Power Company and the United Illuminating Company, and look forward to your presentation. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much, Chair Gillette. So hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Runyon. I'm an energy efficiency consultant with Eversource Energy, and I work primarily on the Energy Storage Solutions program as a program administrator. So we've assembled a great group of subject matter experts here to go over the slides related to the topics in the FDM docket. Let's see, would Mr. Bumpin be able to share the slides for us? Thank you so very much. All right, let's flip to the next slide. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we're going to start by looking at the data collection and reporting requirements, maturity requirements, and application fees. And this is going to be presented by Brian Rice, who has oversight over the NRES and the SCAF program in Connecticut. Then we'll switch over to you and hear from UI about the megawatt allocation and contract length, as well as some data metrics and unique benefits. Then I'll come back and talk briefly about the super, the storage utilization performance ratio. And we have experts on the line who are able to answer questions about the super if there are any, since it's really not my core area of expertise, but I know enough to explain it all to you. And then finally, we'll hear from Customized Energy Solutions about the benefits and costs of different storage durations. So let's go to the next slide. Here are our speakers for today. Again, that's Brian Rice, Director of Customer Solar Programs at Eversource, Logan Terracani's Customer Solar Programs and Products Manager at Avangrid, Rob Whelan, who's Manager of Clean Energy Policy at UI. That's me, Jennifer Runyon, Energy Efficiency Consultant, Eversource. And then we have Madeline Frerson, who's a lead consultant with Customized Energy Solutions, who you'll hear from last. So without further ado, Brian, over to you.
Thank you and good morning. So with respect to data collection and reporting requirements, the EDCs agree, as kind of prompted in the notice of questions, that the data field list currently in place for the Energy Storage Solutions program likely is an appropriate starting point for data collection and reporting requirements. But at this point, without further clarity on program design, I don't think we could say definitively what the data collection and requirements should be. I think it's probably a question that's going to have to be revisited as there is more clarity in the design of the program. Just some initial observations. As an example, it's likely that the data fields need not include a lot of the customer data that is collected in other programs, simply because projects cited on customer premises are excluded per statute. In addition, if there's a highly competitive program or a solicitation program, there may be information that would be excluded or protected based on competitive considerations. Another thought that we want to advance with respect to data collection is definitely looking at opportunities to streamline data collection to the extent that program applications or other data collection can be aligned with other processes. That's definitely a benefit. It's likely that there's going to be considerable overlap in the collection of program information as well as what will be provided in an interconnection application, for example. So in the RS program is probably where we've been able to streamline this the most in having a single application for both interconnection and program enrollment, which has provided a lot of efficiencies. If that's not possible based on program design, still trying to use kind of similar online application portals provides a lot of benefit as well with respect to data collection and organization. And lastly, with respect to reporting, at this time, we definitely advocate pursuing low-cost reporting methods. We can provide a lot of data at pretty much negligible incremental costs simply by making downloadable Excel files available on program websites. Data can also be reported in Pura dockets on a quarterly or annual basis. And lastly, the inclusion in the annual clean energy report prepared in docket 0801 each year is another appropriate venue for reporting program data. There's a question on whether a data portal should be developed. It certainly could be if there was agreement that there was value in that sort of presentation, but we would just caution that there's typically additional costs involved in scoping, designing, and ultimately building a portal that's updated on a more real-time basis and made available publicly. Thank you. Next slide. With respect to application fees, performance assurance, and maturity, we really feel these kind of all go together. Definitely support non-refundable application fees. These are common in all programs, and they're an excellent mechanism to help offset the administrative costs to run these programs and ensure that the participants and the beneficiaries of these programs are funding as much of those costs as possible. It's appropriate to differentiate fees based on project size, and to the extent a program is targeting very large say multi-megawatt storage facilities or even storage facilities of say several hundred kW. High fees may be appropriate and may ultimately represent a pretty small portion of project costs, but also offset a larger portion of administrative costs. Just to provide an example, the application fees that the EDCs collect through RES are about currently $163 per application. And that's $163 for what's on average an 8 to 10 kW PV system. And those fees have been very effective at substantially funding the administrative costs of the program and making sure those costs are not passed on to other customers that aren't participating in the RES program. Because of the considerably smaller volume of bids collected through NRES and SCEF, we're not able to achieve the same level of offset of administrative costs. I think the bid fee for NRES is still just several $100s. Again, that's several $100s for a solar project that could be several megawatts. So it's an incredibly small portion of project costs, and those fee levels aren't offsetting as substantial a portion of administrative costs of those programs. So I think that's something that could be considered with a launch of any front-of-the-meter storage program. Can these projects support higher application fees in order to offset program costs? Performance assurance is something the EDCs support. Again, it's been a common feature in NRES and SCEF. We agree that all else being equal, collecting performance assurance helps ensure that there's a significant commitment to the project on the part of its sponsor. But we don't think performance assurance on its own is really an effective mechanism to achieve all objectives. particularly with respect to project attrition. You know, I think it's well known that hosting capacity on distribution circuits is increasingly becoming saturated, and expanding that hosting capacity is going to require more significant system upgrades. And projects that really aren't submitting an application fee and don't know what their cost responsibility for those upgrades is going to be are at very high risk of, you know, having the economics of their project change significantly, and ultimately lead sponsors to abandoning the project. So, enrolling a project, particularly enrolling a project at a fixed price through a competitive process before its sponsors have knowledge of their interconnection costs, is going to introduce a considerable amount of risk to project attrition. And it's something that the EDCs recommend be mitigated in the design of any program by going beyond the collection of performance assurance and, requiring completion of meaningful interconnection milestones. The most robust milestone would be requiring completion of an interconnection agreement. And that would certainly be a strong signal of commitment to completing the project. But if stakeholders view that's too burdensome, there are other milestones that could be targeted that would still be beneficial. They would ensure that projects have more visibility into their ultimate interconnection costs, and serve to mitigate the risks of interconnection costs to project attrition. Great. Next slide, please, which I think is somebody else to take off.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Brian. Now we're going over to Logan.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. As Jen mentioned before, my name is Logan Tercani. I manage the behind-the-meter energy storage program for UI. I'll be talking through the megawatt allocation and the proposed contract length slides for the EDCs in this presentation. So starting with the megawatt allocation, the EDCs believe that the megawatt allocation should be dependent on the jurisdictional model for the front-of-the-meter storage program. If we were to follow the FERC jurisdictional market participation model, implementing the 80-20 split could miss out on economic benefits of strategic storage placement in areas of high demand. Some of these benefits include the overall statewide BESS capacity, grid edge bolstering, so increasing the reliability of customers on the grid edge, including just as 40 communities in the program, and then also offering greater insight into capacity/demand mapping, which we do on a yearly basis. So placement in high demand areas will help balance the supply and demand, ultimately leading to lower energy prices for our ratepayers. And it will also mitigate the congestion and via strategic placement of storage, which can defer or eliminate the need for costly transmission or distribution upgrades across our grid. If we do not go with the FERC jurisdictional market participation model, implementing the 80-20 split similar to the ESS, SCEF, and NRIS programs would be beneficial, as the megawatt allocation split will be tied to the local distribution needs rather than the ISO New England wholesale market. Next slide, please. Speaking on the contract length, the EDCs recommend a contract length of 10 years. While shorter contracts do offer benefits, we do believe that the benefits of a longer-term 10-year contract outweigh those benefits. So speaking to the pros of the 3 to 5 year contract, it allows for greater flexibility for developers, and it would also provide them with the opportunity to adjust to different market evolutions, such as new technologies coming in, new tax benefits or tax credits that could come into the market. But there are also cons to that shorter contract length. May not provide the developers enough time to fully recover their investment, which may lead to initial lower program participation and potential attrition in the future. If we're to go to a 7 to 10 year contract, it would offer a stable and predictable cost for our ratepayers, and it will align with the current lithium-ion battery expected lifetimes, which would also reflect a similar design to the SCEF and NRES programs, which follow the lifetime of those solar assets that are in those programs. It would also align with our current ESS behind the meter program contract length, which is 10 years, which also falls in line with the warranty of behind the meter battery assets. Some of the cons to that longer 10-year contract is that it may not allow for developer flexibility as the shorter contract term would. And there's less room for market evolution adjustments, such as those new emerging technologies becoming more available at scale. So next slide, I believe I'll pass it off to Rob Whalen, who will talk through the data metrics and unique program benefits.
Thanks, Logan. Morning, everybody. Appreciate it. As Jen said, my name's Rob Whalen. I'm a clean energy policy manager for energy storage here at United Illuminating. First thing I'm going to talk about today is data metrics. So the prompt for the written comments was, do we feel, the utilities feel that we should apply the 5 BCAs that are utilized currently for the energy storage solutions program to front of the meter storage? Or should we alternatively potentially look at the storage utilization performance ratio that's used for the deep front of the meter storage procurement program? And Jen will talk about that further in the presentation, but we'll focus on the 5 BCA tests now. We do feel there is applicability for these 5 BCA tests in the front of the meter storage program, and the utilities would recommend that we target a RIM of 1.4. We think that is in line with the ESS program, and it also does show a very positive ratepayer impact. I will preface all of this that this is a lot of the math, which CES will get into further in the presentation, is wholly dependent on the ITC still in existence. I'm not going to get into the political landscape, but we kind of all know what's going on, and there's no assurance that the ITC is going to be available by the time this program rolls out. So we need to be cognizant of that as we move forward with the analysis and as we look at these BCAs. We did pro and con these a little bit. Like I said, I think they're all applicable to the program. There's pros and cons to each one. We also think that these may need to be tweaked or recalibrated a little bit to fit within the confines of whatever that final front of the meter storage program design is. So total resource cost test, the first one here, is the pro would be that it's useful for overall program efficiency assessment, but the con is that it is complex, it's resource intensive, and it may overlook some of the non-monetary benefits of front of the meter storage, particularly in the wholesale market. The participant or the utility cost test, and this is also known as the program administrator cost test, in the ESS program. We think it is definitely, for our case, it's essential for understanding the utility financial impact to the utilities and if there was any partner program administrators. But again, it might not capture the broader societal benefits, and it can be influenced by some utility-specific factors such as our internal cost, labor constraints, and whatnot. The ratepayer impact measure. So this is one of the two, what I'd say, key BCA tests for the program. The RIM test, obviously, we know it's very important for regulatory and our ratepayer considerations. I think at the end of the day, we're all very cognizant of what the cost for these programs are for our ratepayers. But the cons would be that there could be a narrow focus on the rate impacts. And again, that's more applicable if we are to apply the wholesale market construct to these BCAs. And it also may not present comprehensive bill impact information. So when we get down to the nitty-gritty, we talk about that public benefits portion of the bill. Again, we haven't really breached the topic of cost recovery yet in this docket. The assumption is, though, I think for all of us, that this is kind of coming out the ESS docket. That's recoverable through the non-bypassable. Therefore, there's a potential for front of the meter storage that would be the cost recovery mechanism as well. So just important to note on that. The fourth is, and this is the second key metric here, is the participant cost test. This is something developers are paying very much attention to. It's, to help kind of see what that economic gap is going to be between what it's costing them to install the storage systems, what their expectations are from a revenue perspective. Again, wholesale versus local distribution grid, that economic gap is going to change significantly based on what the program design is going to be. And, we want to, the goal, I think, is to maintain a positive participant cost test score of 1 or greater. again, we think that it's less, I don't want to say it's less applicable to front of the meter storage. Again, if there's not direct participation, again, that's where the wholesale market construct would come in, and it may overlook broader program benefits, as along with some of the other BCs here. And finally, societal cost test. So we think this is crucial for evaluating overall benefits, but it is complex to implement, quantify, and it may require extensive data that are on, external resources, such as if we were to do wholesale market participation, we're going to rely a lot on ISO New England metrics and data, making sure that comes in a timely fashion. I will say that with the ESS program, just as a benchmark, there is a lot of time, effort, and cost that comes in with the EM and V analysis and the work that goes along with those efforts. So again, keep that in mind as we come up with the front of the meter storage design and what those metrics and data requirements are going to be. And you can go to the next slide, please. So unique program benefits. So this prompt was basically, are there other technologies, could the front of the meter storage program essentially be technology agnostic, and should we allow other technologies to participate? I believe the short answer to that question is yes. I would say that of the three that were mentioned in the prompt, lithium ion would be best because it allows for better frequency control, co-sided peak shaving, and more distributed, fast reacting and short lasting duration. So we're thinking of, event calling windows and shorter timeframes. I think that's what the utility, that's kind of been our point of view all along throughout this docket is, like we do with the ESS program, we target 3 to 4 hour peaks to do dispatching. So again, lithium ion would be ideal for that time period. And the other thing too is that from a population density, right? Lithium ion, they smaller in some cases, depending on the size, better for higher population density areas. We know that, and we're recommending for this program as well, that the low distressed municipality should be key, and we still focus on those areas of the state, and to present economic stimuli and support environmental goals. Pump hydro storage requires a larger footprint. The pros are high capacity and long duration. Again, ideal for large scale energy storage. It has a very, very high efficiency rate, but there are high initial costs for the infrastructure development, and it does require specific geographical features like elevation differences, water availability. We know our shoreline in the state is widely developed, rivers, ponds, lakes, those are other options, but again, limited space availability, I think, and I'm sure the developers have some thoughts on these as well. The other one is flow batteries. So again, those are very easily scalable for large scale energy storage. Very high durability, much longer life cycle. Again, meets some of the fire safety concerns we see, such as the Moss Landing situation that happened a couple months ago. Events like that are pretty non-existent with a flow type battery. But there are, again, like with the hydro, higher initial costs compared to some of the other technologies, lower energy density compared to lithium ion, and there's more complex design and maintenance requirements for flow batteries. Again, and this is an unproven technology. There's not a lot of flow batteries out there. And lithium ion, pumped hydro, those are more established. They're used in other jurisdictions. So we do have some benchmarking we can do off those. With that, I think we can go to the next slide. And I believe Jen was going to take over from here.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rob.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
thanks so much. Right. So let's talk the storage utilization performance ratio. I don't know why it says rating there, but anyway, so this metric is designed to compare the actual performance of the battery against a theoretical performance target. And when we're talking about performance, we're talking about the financial performance. So what the program administrators will do that are using the super, they will measure the the actual amount that that battery earned in the wholesale market and compare it to the theoretical maximum amount it could have earned in the wholesale market on every single day. And that will ensure that that battery is being operated correctly to maximize its revenue. That means it will be cycled optimally and it will be designed to really maximize its profits in the market. So it's a complex metric. Many, many hours of thought and analysis obviously been put into it, and everything that I've seen, it is extremely well thought out. But there are some definite hurdles or some difficulties in implementing it, at least that I can see from this point. And again, it has not yet been implemented fully. So first, there's daily data dependency on the ISO New England data. So it's got to be accurate, it's got to be timely, and we're going to need to see it right away. It will require daily tracking on a daily basis for 20 years. And then again, because it's a 20-year contract, that market is expected to change. The wholesale market is expected to change quite a bit over that time frame. So many variables are going into not only just calculating that performance, but also for developers who are having to get a handle on how they're going to structure their bids to make sure they are in line with how the market will look in the future. And it's brand new. It's exciting, but it's untested. So as we did some new things in the ESS program, they don't always work out exactly the way we had originally intended them to. And so that's the only sort of reservations that we have. I would say, coming from the demand response world, which is where I sit, we would prefer to measure the actual kilowatts dispatched to reduce demand rather than comparing performance in the financial markets. But again, and also, this would only be applicable if the FERC jurisdictional construct is chosen for this program. So that's all I've got on the super. I'm going to hand it over to Madeline to go over some BCA.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Frierson, and I'm with the consulting group at Customized Energy Solutions, or CES. So back in 2022, CES, in partnership with the firm SEA, was hired by the Connecticut Green Bank to conduct a benefit cost analysis of supporting front-of-the-meter storage. And then in 2023, SEA and CES were engaged by the electric distribution companies, Eversource and UI, to evaluate tariff and incentive structures using those benefit cost modeling tools we developed. So coming to 2023, in response to Docket 250115, CES has updated the BCA results to reflect the now approved wholesale distribution access tariffs, or WDAT, values and time of use periods for both utilities. So as part of this analysis, the CES team modeled the economic gap between the levelized cost and revenues to really assess the financial viability of front-of-the-meter storage systems. And this modeling was focused on battery system durations of 2 and 4 hours long. The time of the analysis, long duration storage systems were not considered, and the analysis was limited to lithium-ion technologies as instructed by the clients. This decision at the time was made based on the overall scope of the project, what were the commercially available technologies, as well as considering the configurations in the queue at the time. So these charts here show illustrates the economic gaps between the 2-hour and 4-hour systems, and for installations both in the Eversource and UI territories. So in the cost bars, which are kind of these orange yellow bars, you can see it incorporates a range of cost components, including system costs, construction, interconnection, wire charges, operating expenses, as well as taxes. On the revenue side, so the green columns, we're considering potential income from ISO New England's wholesale markets, such as capacity market, energy market, spinning reserves. We also factored in benefits from the federal investment tax credit. And to clarify, this chart shows the costs and benefits to the participant of the program, as opposed to the program administrator or the ratepayer, which is why in this revenue section, we are not going to show T&D deferral or societal impacts as the benefits. So the long short story here is when comparing the 2 and 4 hour systems, we observed a larger cost revenue gap for the 4 hour systems, which ultimately would imply that a higher incentive would be required to make the 4 hour systems financially viable for those participants. And this wider gap, as we can see here, is primarily due to that increased equipment costs associated with the 4 hour benefits. And while these 4 hour systems are going to generate more benefits, as you can see, the revenue bar is higher, the additional income does not sufficiently offset the higher costs. So as far as next steps, in order to perform this analysis on an 8 hour or more system, this analysis would need to be reperformed using the most recent avoided energy supply components in New England report, which considers the impact of energy storage systems with durations greater than 4, whereas in the previous report, only durations shorter than 4 were considered. Additionally, CES would need to socialize and incorporate updated pricing for energy storage systems, considering those non-lithium ion technologies as well. And then if you don't mind going to the next slide, where we present a scenario where revenue from the wholesale market is excluded. As expected, that economic gap widens significantly since fewer revenue streams are available to offset those system costs. And that's all we have today, but we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. As I mentioned, we're going to turn first to questions from Purist staff, and I believe Mr. Arpin is going to get us started here, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the EDCs for their presentation and time today. Mr. Bumpin, could you please turn to slide 4? So my first question, I know the EDCs touched on this a little, but just to clarify, do the EDCs have any recommended revisions to the ESS data field list if an FTM program were to be developed? And if so, could they please explain?
So not at this time, because we don't think we have sufficient information to provide those recommendations. Ultimately, the data field list is going to depend on the type of program design. So I think we'd just be speculating at this point on what should and shouldn't be included, and any recommendations would be subject to revision at a later date. Again, I think at this point we do note that, like, for example, collecting household income data probably isn't going to be relevant to this program, because the eligible facilities aren't going to be sited at customer premises. And again, we commented how, if the program is structured around highly competitive and commercially sensitive solicitations, that may impact, if not the data fields that are collected, how those data fields are managed, and they may require protection. But at this point, I don't think we can provide much more in terms of clarity on what should and shouldn't be included from the current ESS data field list.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Rice. Now, staying on this slide, could the EDCs please comment on any potential cost savings, administrative or otherwise, that could result from combining program applications with interconnection applications?
I certainly can't quantify them at this time, but just examples of cost savings are, if you can utilize an already licensed portal for data collection, then you can avoid costs associated with licensing a separate portal, a separate instance. So there's one example. And then, but honestly, I think a lot of the savings are more or less readily quantified and come in administrative efficiencies. So just eliminating the requirement for participants to provide redundant data that's already been provided elsewhere, can provide a considerable amount of time savings in preparing an application and just preparing an application accurately. Not only is it less time to upload information for an initial application, you're mitigating risks of inconsistent information and having to go back to applications and reconcile inconsistencies. So there's just an administrative efficiency there that is difficult to quantify, the absolute cost savings, because they accrue to to many entities, but are unquestionably there.
Thank you for that response. I'd like to turn to slide 5, please. So my question here, would the EDCs be able to recommend a specific application or performance assurance fee for an FTM storage program at this time?
At this time, no. Again, the process for developing fees for programs in the past has followed considerable more clarity in the program design. So I think the first thing that's going to be required is more clarity on how this program will be designed, what its size will be, what its scope will be, and then the EDCs would have to estimate the cost to administer that, and then you generally be as a starting point dividing that cost by expected application volume, and determining what's a reasonable fee and how much administrative costs can you hope to offset. Because it may not be a goal to offset 100% of administrative costs if that's going to result in a fee that is at risk of discouraging participation. So there's a lot of steps that I think go into recommending a fee, and I don't think there's sufficient clarity to complete all those steps at this point.
I appreciate that response. Now, staying on this slide, could the EDCs please explain whether and how application fees could be scaled or tiered based on project size?
I mean, a simple way to do it would just be having the fee be assessed on a $1 per kW basis. Or you can, tier the fee based on size category. So like I said, the current programs that, I work on in Connecticut, as I mentioned, has a fee of $163. So that's applicable to any project that's 0 to 25 kW effectively in RES. And then again, the NRES program has a bid fee of the specific value is escaping me, but it's several $100s. And again, that's applicable to projects that can be anywhere from more than 25 kW up to several megawatts. So particularly for when you're talking about projects of several megawatts, an application fee of several $100s is pretty minuscule portion of total project costs. Just as a point of comparison, the Massachusetts SMART program also has application fees. It also includes projects of several megawatts, and those application fees for the larger projects can approach several $1,000s to offset a larger portion of administrative costs.
Thank you for that response. Now, staying on this slide, could the EDCs please explain why performance assurance mechanisms in the NRES and SCEF programs have not been as effective at mitigating project attrition to date?
So as an initial matter, I'd say I don't think we can draw a lot of final conclusions on project attrition in NRES and SCEF at this point. Particularly NRES, the majority of selected projects have not reached their termination dates under their agreements, and even when they do, they have the ability to request extensions to those dates from the ombudsperson. So I don't think we have an answer on project attrition. But just mechanically, we're aware of what impacts the economics of these projects. And we're aware that interconnection costs are a significant variable. And those interconnection costs can be high if a project is seeking to interconnect on a circuit where system upgrades are required to enable their interconnection. And if a project hasn't even submitted an interconnection application, they can do their best to estimate and kind of handicap whether they're going to have high interconnection costs or not with available tools, their experience, the hosting capacity map. But there's still considerable uncertainty. And if a project bids a fixed price within NRES and then discovers that their interconnection costs are much higher than anticipated, it's going to be very difficult for that project to continue to perform at its fixed price. So we expect that, a meaningful number of projects are going to be caught in that spot, and ultimately be abandoned. When they're abandoned, we don't know. I mean, they may seek extensions, trying to buy more time and see if they can, get a better outcome. But, all else being equal, they're not going to be able to move forward.
Thank you for that response. So the follow-up, would you say that interconnection costs then are a primary reason for project attrition in the NRES and SCEP programs, or are there other factors as well that might?
I mean, there can be other factors, of course. There's a lot of milestones that need to be reached to bring a project to completion, but the interconnection costs are a significant risk factor, and they're a significant risk factor that can be mitigated by progressing through the interconnection process and getting more clarity about ultimate interconnection costs.
Thank you for that response. Now, staying on this slide, on average, would the EDCs be able to estimate how long it would take a commercial storage project to receive a signed interconnection agreement or a completed impact study?
It's going to range based on project specifics, so I don't think we can provide an estimate. And I certainly can't provide an estimate because I'm not as closely responsible for managing those processes.
I appreciate that response. Staying on the slide, could the risk of FTM storage projects hesitating to apply for interconnection without an incentive guarantee potentially limit participation in a procurement-based FTM storage program?
Yeah, I mean, I get the dynamic. It's a chicken or an egg problem. I've personally had this discussion with developers, saying that, well, I don't want to, incur the cost for a feasibility study and interconnection until I know that I'm going to be able to sell my output at, a predetermined price. But that's true. But that doesn't, make the risks I was talking about previously go away. Because, do you want to, why do you want to spend money on that stuff? I mean, there's a risk of spending money on all that stuff. When at the end, you've already locked in what your compensation is going to be, and you have no ability to adjust it, if and when you discover that your interconnection costs exceed what you estimated. I know again, just to provide a point of contrast, that's less of an issue under different program designs, particularly program designs that aren't necessarily contingent on winning an RFP. So in Massachusetts, we have the SMART program, which is a declining block program, in which projects that have their interconnection agreement in hand can apply, and if they meet eligibility requirements, they will be provided a statement of qualification that provides certainty on the ultimate revenue prior to construction. So even when they're going through the process, I mean, they may not know what block they're in, and that's going to impact their final compensation, but they can probably anticipate, they're going to be land somewhere between block, 7 and 9, just use hypothetical numbers, and they know what the range of compensation that would result from that would be. But there are also risks with, a block program, in that it relies more on administrative pricing, which, whoever sets that administrative pricing may or may not get it right. When you issue an RFP, you go out to the market, you have greater confidence that you're getting the lowest cost resources.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Rice. Now I'd like to turn to slide 6, please. So my question here, if FTM storage allocations were not assigned on an EDC specific basis, how would program costs be allocated across the EDCs? And a second question to that is there a risk that one EDC could bear a disproportionate share of the program's cost while the grid benefits are distributed proportionally across both EDC territories?
So the cost split, I would need to, I think, do a little bit more digging on that. But I would assume it would be similar to the ESS and NRES SCEP programs. But there definitely is the opportunity for that unbalanced distribution of funding to to come up in this program, given one EDC may have more projects than the other. I think that's just the nature of what this program could be, could lead to. But can you repeat the first portion of the question again, please?
Yeah, if FTM storage allocations were not assigned on an EDC specific basis, how would program costs be allocated across the EDCs? And then, is there a risk that there'd be a disproportionate share of the cost and benefits across both EDCs?
Got it. Yeah, I think we would need to, once a determination has been made, we would need to revisit the potential cost split, given the FERC jurisdictional market participation model.
Okay, thank you for that response. And would the EDCs expect that storage projects would be cited in one EDC territory more than the other, or is that still an unknown?
It would be an unknown. I think given ultimate land allocations, there's definitely benefit to different EDC territories, but it would kind of need to be an as we go basis.
Okay, thank you for that response. I would like to turn to slide 7, please. So my question here, could the EDCs please outline the risk associated with an FTM storage contract length exceeding 10 years?
So the risk that we would see is just the expected lifetime of the batteries, kind of capping out at that 12-year mark. We risk the ultimate degradation and failure of some batteries, which could lead to complications with developers and different customers across our territories.
Okay, thank you. And if hypothetically the batteries could last for more than 10 years, would a longer contract length be a way to smooth out the cost of the program to a greater point in the future? I believe OCC had a comment on that in their written comments. I was wondering what the EDCs thought of that.
It could in the future. We would need to revisit that when the time comes. Given the estimated lifetime is around that 7 to 10 year mark, I think we would want to kind of stick to that as the EDCs.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to turn to slide 8, please. So my question here, could the EDCs please clarify how the ESS BCA test would need to be adjusted if a FERC jurisdictional program were implemented?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Mr. Arpin. We would have to definitely look at, so right now, the math is based on pretty much a lot of the metrics from the state of Connecticut, ratepayer usage and whatnot. So we would need to expand or throw a wider net to cover all of ISO New England operating territory and take all these other factors, usage outside the state, to better determine what the impacts of wholesale market participation would be.
Okay, thank you. And is there a risk that then the BCA test would not be as specific to Connecticut because then it would include data from other states?
Yes. Yep. Accurate statement.
Okay. Now staying on this slide, could the EDCs please comment on the accuracy and reliability of the ESS BCA test models, particularly with respect to the RIM and the PCT?
I think so we're now going, I believe, into year 5 of the ESS program. So just, my previous experience is that those tests and the methodologies to do so have been refined year over year. So I think it's very safe to say that we've gotten to a point where they are accurate and the data points that we're getting through, I don't want to open up a can of worms when talking about DERMS, but I think the data points we've got through the reporting and how we, do the math, for lack of a better term, those processes have improved immensely since that program has started. So we're at a much better place right now with that.
Okay, thank you for that response. And now I'd like to clarify a statement on the slide about the RIM. Could you please clarify the con for the RIM that it has a narrow focus on rate impacts?
So I would say it has a narrow focus on rate impacts from within the wholesale market construct. So at a local distribution level, if we were to just have these batteries participate in there, we have more insight to what the ratepayer impact on bill impact would be from that perspective. But if they're in the wholesale market and, selling at those rates, there could be, it effectively may lower those ratepayer bills, but there also could be the impact, and I don't want to throw another factor in here, but market saturation, right? Because other states could be doing similar large-scale storage projects that might have an impact here as well over time.
And to follow up on that last point about the market saturation, would that automatically be considered in the RIM today, or would that be something that would need to be added?
I probably would defer to CES on that question because I honestly do not know if that was factored into the current evaluation that has been done.
Would CES be able to answer that on the call? If not, we can move on to slide 9, please. So my question here, if FTM storage projects are strategically placed in specific communities, could this result in local pushback to the perceived safety or fire risk associated with energy storage systems?
Absolutely. It's part of a day in the life of energy storage. And we're actually working, so I'm involved with the best microgrid pilots in the state of Connecticut, and we're actively working with the fire personnel and representatives in each of those communities, as well as doing our own internal processes with our operations and planning teams to try to identify what the best practices are within other jurisdictions for spacing, easements, methodologies for fire suppression. Right now at the state level, our fire and building codes do not incorporate energy storage. I believe in the previous version of the International Fire Code, which is currently adopted by the state, energy storage is not covered in those fire codes. My understanding is that the Department of Administrative Services is going to meet again in October, and that's when they're going to adopt the most recent version of the International Fire Code, which does incorporate energy storage into it. So we're definitely watching and seeing what that's going to be. I would say there are municipalities in the state that have started to develop their own code, but we look at the International Fire Code as a standard, and there's best practices to follow. New York State has had established fire codes around storage for a long time. They set a very high bar. So, we're looking at that very deeply as kind of the form factor and the best use case for best practices for fire safety.
Thank you for that response.
You're
The
welcome.
follow-up on that, are there any other ways of mitigating the risk of local pushback besides updated fire safety codes?
Definitely. I mean, community outreach is always something we start early on, just talking to community members, municipal leaders, on what the project is, siting areas to determine where it would be located. Again, this, I think in respects of front of the meter storage, these are going to be third-party developers that are acquiring land and looking where to place it. Where the utilities would come in, it's our operating territory, our customers. So we're definitely going to have to police to make sure that developers are engaging the right folks within those communities to make sure that there's awareness and acceptance as these projects move forward.
Thank you for that response. Now, staying on this slide, so if a competitive procurement FTM storage program were implemented, would the EDCs support offering bid preferences for specific storage locations or technologies? Why or why not?
I believe we would. I don't want to opine on it too much here, but I believe we would, and I kind of just will use the distressed municipality as an example. I think we would want to be more generous, or at least more flexible as far as procurements goes for those areas that we've targeted in the state, because I think that's where we can As we've seen with the ESS program, through the metrics, the M&V, and some of the results to date, that's where we can gain the largest impact. Again, I think the opportunities for the technology to be as agnostic as we want in those specific areas, because again, those are primarily high density, high populated areas where there's less land to place a larger battery system. So we'll be limited from a technology perspective, I think. And in those types of areas, the primary would probably be a lithium-ion solution.
Thank you for that response. Would the EDCs like to opine as well about bid preferences for specific technologies, such as pumped hydro storage or flow batteries, for example?
I don't know if anybody from Eversource wants to take that question. I mean, again, these are newer technologies, and I'm not overly familiar with any existing, type of procurement type programs that are out there within other jurisdictions for these. So I think it's early days for us to comment on that. But if anybody feels free to jump in, go ahead. I see Brian there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's early to provide recommendations. I would just offer the advice of tread carefully with bid preferences, because depending on kind of the economics of a solicitation, applying a bid preference can really sway things. Right now in the NRES program, in the medium and large categories, which are competitively bid, it's almost true to say having a bid preference is effectively a prerequisite to being selected. The significant majority of projects have bid preferences. So you just want to be mindful that if you apply a bid preference especially to a specific technology, you could effectively be providing such a leg up in the competitive process that you close out opportunities to other technologies, which is likely not what the goal of competitive solicitation would be.
I appreciate that response, Mr. Rice. Now, staying on this slide, I was curious if the EDCs are aware of any recently developed pumped hydro or flow battery storage facilities within their service territories. And if so, could the EDCs please provide details on these projects?
For United Illuminating, I am not aware of any pumped hydro or flow batteries within our operating territory at present.
Is Eversource aware of any projects in those technologies? If not, we can move on to the next question.
Jen, I see Jen popped up there. Sorry.
I was just
Mr.
going to say
Arbin.
no. I mean, the pumped hydro would be operated by the ISO New England. And I do know there are some in New England, but I'm actually not even sure where they're located.
Okay, thank you for that response. I would like to turn to slide 10, please. So my question here, if a FERC jurisdictional FTM storage program model were adopted, would the EDCs recommend implementing super? Why or why not?
I would like to call on my colleague, Laura Purbeck, if you're able to comment on that.
Good morning. I apologize. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. If a FERC jurisdictional FTM storage program model were adopted, would the EDCs recommend implementing super? Why or why not?
So I think one of the main things with the super is that it's a complicated calculation. And I think if this program is intended to have a large number of participants, I would say anything over a handful, then I think that would get pretty complicated in terms of the administration and the calculation of that formula. And I'm not sure if there might be a different or a different way to calculate performance metrics, but I would also be interested in what Deep's perspective is on that question.
Okay, appreciate that response, Ms. Purbeck. Now moving on to slide 11, please. So my question here, which battery type is more commonly used, a 4-hour or a 2-hour battery, and why?
So not I don't think we have a straightforward answer. I think it depends on the region, on the use case, on the configuration of the the contract. So are they primarily being served to perform ancillary services? Are they attached to a contract for a certain number of hours? I will comment and say I think we're increasingly seeing more 4 hours being procured, but I don't think there's a definitive 2 versus 4 at the moment. It's highly dependent on the use case and the region of the battery.
Okay, thank you. Could you elaborate a little more on which use cases might be better suited for a 4-hour battery versus a 2-hour battery?
Sure. So it's going to depend on how that battery is intended to be used. So if, for instance, if it's under a contract with a utility that is trying to target 2 hours of dispatch during the day, because that's when they see their peak load, they may be more suited for a 2-hour. If you're in a region that is trying to capture a larger volume of renewable penetration that has a longer peak they're trying to capture, potentially a 4-hour may be more useful, particularly if you are more interested in targeting some of the more ancillary services, reserves, regulation that may be more suited for the shorter duration hours.
Okay, thank you for that response. Now I just have a couple more questions, and they do not reference specific slides, but they do reference interrogatory responses that the EDCs have recently filed. So my first question, would the EDCs be able to provide any updates on their negotiations with DEEP regarding DEEP's 200 megawatt FTM storage project? In particular, are there any issues or concerns that may have arisen during these discussions?
I'll take that. I don't have an update at this time. We are still in contract negotiations. They do seem to be going slower right now, but I don't really have any update beyond that at this time.
Do you have any, could you please elaborate a little more on why they might be going slower? Like, are there any issues that may have come up?
I think the federal government and some of the recent decisions that have come out of Washington may be playing a bit of a role in just in general. I think that the current administration has affected the renewable industry in many different ways. So that could potentially be playing a role in just making parties nervous about procuring these technologies and tariffs and costs and things of that nature. But nothing has specifically been brought to our attention at this time. Most of the contract versions are still with the other counterparties, and we are awaiting their movement and sending it back to us before we can move forward in the contract negotiation process any further.
Okay, thank you for that response, Ms. Perbeck. Now another question on a different topic. This is a quite lengthy question, but it pertains to the DERMS platform. So in their responses to CA 21, the EDCs indicated that they currently lack the capability to issue real-time location-specific active dispatch signals and have no plans to develop such functionality. However, the authority's ruling on motion number 18 and docket number 230805 requires the EDCs to submit a detailed plan for a centralized distribution level DERMS platform with flexible dispatch functionality in the EDC's next rate case applications. So I was wondering if the EDCs could please provide an update on the development of this centralized DERMS plan, including whether it will incorporate real-time or location-based dispatch capabilities.
So I can speak from a United Illuminating perspective. I would say that right now we have no plans to develop an internal DERMS, and I believe that was a response in one of our interrogatories in the rate case as well. We're not seeking any recovery within the rate year or the test year for that. That is our goal, though. I think is right now we leverage third-party vendors for DERMS. They're very much rules-based, especially for the ESS program where we're going in there and we're calling events in the battery. It's based on ISO New England peak forecast. And I think we spent a lot of time I believe it was year 2 or year 3 of the ESS docket talking about DERMS and educating each other on how they work and how they can be utilized. I think long term, that's where, at least from a United Illuminating, from a utility perspective, that's where we want to go. But as of right now, I can succinctly say that we don't have any plans to develop a DERMS.
Could you please elaborate a little more on why UI doesn't have a plan to develop that, if that is a long-term goal?
I think right now, and I don't want to, step outside the confines of the rate case, but I do think there is a cost aspect there that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Would Eversource be able to provide a response to that question as well, please?
And Mr. Arpin, I would just add, we can certainly file a supplement to the interrogatory if that helps.
I think that would be helpful, yes. Thank you, Mr. Whalen.
You're welcome.
That would be.
I was going to suggest the same thing for Eversource. I am not the expert in our DERMS plans, but I definitely appreciate the question. And I think the best way is to take the opportunity to consult with subject matter experts and supplement the original response to CAE 21 in light of the additional question.
I appreciate that response. Thank you, Mr. Rice. And I'd like to thank the EDCs again for their presentation and time today. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Miss Molly Charles. I believe she has some additional questions.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the EDCs for their presentation this morning. My first question is back to the data reporting, if we could turn to slide 4. So I was wondering if the EDCs could provide more detail on the potential cost of a hosted data portal compared to the low-cost data reporting methods mentioned here.
Not at this time. And I think part of our recommendation is based on recent experience with kind of building out a data platform that originated with activity in the energy affordability docket. And then there was a desire to expand it beyond that. And I think that as that process progressed, it was just recognized that the costs were quite high relative to the considerably lower costs of making similar data available through existing channels. So I think a lot of it, ultimately the costs are going to be based on kind of what you're trying to accomplish with the data portal. If you want real-time reporting, how much customization you want. But there's just a meaningful risk that we've observed from experience that the cost of a more robust data portal can significantly exceed the costs of providing similar data through other channels.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, if the EDCs were to provide data either on the program website or through filings to PURA, how often would you recommend that those updates be made?
I mean, it depends on the nature of the data and the intended use of sharing it. Monthly is probably pretty frequent in a lot of cases and not necessary. So I'd say quarterly or even annual, depending on the data. If there's really going to be no avenue for utilizing the data on a quarterly basis, then there's probably no need to collect it on a quarterly basis either.
And would you or any of the other EDC stakeholders have a sense of how frequently the data would need to be used by program participants or stakeholders?
I don't. Again, that could probably vary considerably based on the type of data. It could also vary based on the the management of the program. You know, if the program is reviewed on an annual basis, then obviously you want current data to inform that review. But if it's not, then there's less urgency.
Okay, thanks for that response. My next question is on slide 7. So could the EDCs please expand on specific ways that developers might be able to benefit from more flexibility with a shorter contract length?
Yeah, I think our line of thinking there was just with how often the battery storage and how it's progressing going forward, having the greater flexibility to maybe shift focus from away from a lithium ion technology to a more robust, more thought out technology in the future that's more readily available would be beneficial to the developers, especially if it's provided at a lower cost. They may be able to switch from a traditional lithium ion to something that may come within the near distant future.
Okay, thank you. Did the gap analysis and BCA measures, did those assume a 10-year contract length?
I will refer to Madeline for that
I
question.
believe so. I believe it's a 10-year contract length.
Thank you for that. If we could just turn to the next slide, please. Are the EDCs aware of any performance metrics or BCA metrics that are used in similar programs in other jurisdictions?
For a front of the meter storage program in particular?
Yeah, I know New York's program was discussed at one point.
Yeah, I believe it was the Green Bank that brought up the New York program. And frankly, I don't know the ins and outs of the New York program. I know that there's definitely some questions around FERC jurisdiction with that program. So I wouldn't get too deep in the weeds on whether implementing those metrics from a program that's, frankly questionable, apply those to the Connecticut front of the meter storage program. But these are standardized tests. I think they are used widely within other jurisdictions. I don't think, it's different to the storage util performance ratio that DEEP is using. That is not a test that is used in other jurisdictions, and I think that's another reason is why we're kind of steering away from it. Not that it's a bad concept, and I don't want to get too far away from the original question here, but again, it's unproven. We really haven't seen that reporting. It's not commonly used. There's, like I think I said earlier, there's external reporting that we have dependencies on, whereas the data is more widely available. It's proven. We've used it in the SS program. So I can't really specify jurisdictions that utilize these metrics, but we know these are tried, tested, and proven metrics that we use.
Thank you. I appreciate that
You're
response.
welcome.
I don't know if any other stakeholder has any more information on that. If not, then I just have a couple questions on slide 12. So could you clarify whether the analysis of costs and benefits without wholesale revenues assumes that storage is still buying power at wholesale rates and using the wholesale distribution access tariff? Sorry, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, I can confirm the only difference between that previous slide and this slide is the removal of those revenues. So yes, the battery would still be charging via the wholesale distribution access tariff.
Thank you. And has there been any analysis of the second contract that's been discussed, or program construct that's been discussed where there's no FERC jurisdictional market participation? Has there been any analysis of the incentive level that would be needed for that?
That has not been fully incorporated into this analysis. The the inputs analysis remain the same from the previous BCA, just with the removal of those wholesale revenues. So the structure has not been modified.
Okay, I appreciate that. And that is all my questions, so I'll turn it to my colleague, Mr. Graham Turk.
Thank you, Ms. Charles. I have a first question. Could you please turn to slide 5? Okay, so this is for the EDCs. How do the EDCs model storage resources for interconnection impact studies? And here I'm curious, especially about feeders with high DER saturation, where the presence of storage could alleviate congestion by aligning charging with periods of high renewable generation.
I can answer that question, and I don't think we have our system planning and engineering specialists on the call. So I would recommend we provide a written response to that.
Got it. Thank you. This is on slide 9. Great, thanks. Could the EDCs please comment on how they might quantify the unique benefits of flow batteries or pumped hydro storage?
I can't opine on that. I don't know if maybe CES has a thought on that. If not, I mean, I would probably look to provide some written comments on that, because again, those are technologies we really haven't looked at or done any metrics around for potential programs like this. So I don't know that there's baselines that we've utilized in the past where we could apply.
I can just make a few high-level comments. I think when you think about those different technologies, high-level benefits are some of the ones that I think Rob mentioned: reduce fire risk, reduce use of potentially supply-constrained materials, so potentially more access to less rare earth materials that might be needed in lithium-ion batteries, potentially the more cost-effective way to scale up longer duration, even going into multi-day storage, whereas lithium-ion batteries do not scale as exponentially for those type of cost factors, as well as potentially some additional ancillary services benefits for some of the kind of rotating machinery type of equipment that you might see. So just a couple kind of bulleted points on potential benefits for those type of technologies.
Thank you. The rest of my questions are on slide 11 and all for Ms. Frierson. Wait till we get to that one. Great. Could you please specify what capacity price forecast was used to estimate capacity revenues?
Sure, and we can provide specifics in a supplemental. I will clarify that the forecast used at this time was the same that was used in the previous BCA analysis that was performed in 2023. So that has not been updated. We can provide, I don't have those numbers off my head, I can provide in a supplemental on the specific values used in that. But I believe that's available in the previous BCA analysis that was done.
Great, thank you. Does this analysis include battery energy and capacity degradation? And if so, do you know at what rate?
Yes, it would include that battery degradation. I do not know off the top of my head. We used assumptions that were socialized with the greater community. And again, they were the same assumptions that were used in that 2023 BCA report that would be publicly available. But I can clarify that. But that has not been changed since the last version of this report.
Got it. Thank you. Do you know why frequency and voltage regulation were not included in this analysis?
We use the same kind of client agreed upon revenues that we decided in the 2023 BCA. I will need to kind of confirm that decision point that was made back then.
Great. And last one is, do you know which assumptions were made about storage deployment outside Connecticut in the ISO New England operating territory, which might lead to diminishing revenues for these assets that were modeled?
Sure. So we have a view on kind of ISO New England and the neighboring territories, storage deployment, and overall kind of how that feeds into the LMP prices across the region. Again, those assumptions have not been changed since the 2023 version of this report. So that will be consistent, that assumptions on those other region storage deployments as was used then.
Great, thank you. And those are all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Turk. So I'd like to open it up if any stakeholders have any questions at this stage for the EDCs. Please use the raise hand function, and I'll call on you in order as I see them pop up. Okay, not seeing any hands. Does Commissioner Karen, do you have any questions before we move on?
No, thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, great. All right, so we will move on to the Green Bank presentation.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. All right. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share today. My name is Sarah Pine, and I'm an Associate Director on the Incentives Programs team at the Connecticut Green Bank. Joining me today are several Green Bank employees, including Sergio Carrillo, Managing Director of Incentive Programs, Brendan Smith, Manager, Alex Koktenenko, Deputy General Counsel, and also joining us today is Jim Kennerly from Sustainable Energy Advantage and is available for questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Here is a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. First, we'll look at the program's megawatt allocation recommendation, data collection requirements, non-refundable application fee, and refundable performance assurance, and contract lengths. And then we'll end with questions. Next slide, please. All right, let's discuss the program megawatt allocation across the utility territories. The Green Bank believes that a fixed split, like the 80-20 that was discussed between Eversource and UI territories, might not necessarily be the best approach. This could be because viable, cost-efficient sites might not be evenly distributed in each utility territory. A market-driven approach could allow for the most cost-effective projects to participate in the program, regardless of their location. But if there is clear evidence that siting in one specific territory offers greater value to ratepayers, then it might be feasible to consider a targeted allocation. In alignment with the Energy Storage Solutions Program, the incentive costs could be recovered in each respective EDC territory similarly, or if it's easier, the 80-20 split could be used, as this might be an easier way to project cost estimates for the program. Next slide, please. All right, moving on to data collection requirements. The Green Bank believes that many of the data points already collected under the Energy Storage Solutions Program could be replicated in the front of the meter storage program. We do understand that some of the dispatch data from front of the meter resources might be commercially sensitive, unlike the behind the meter program. But we also know that data transparency is crucial for evaluation, especially EMNV evaluation. Therefore, we would suggest that PURA could require data collection requirements, but potentially allow for some sensitive data to be submitted under a protective order if needed. we know that the data is important for program evaluation, cost effectiveness analysis, and potentially adjusting incentive levels over time, depending on how the program is designed and structured. Next slide, please. All right, on to non-refundable application fees and refundable performance assurance. One lesson that we've learned from co-adminning the Energy Storage Solutions program is the need to reduce speculative applications and project attrition rates. That being said, the Green Bank supports the use of both a non-refundable application fee and a refundable performance assurance payment, even though these are not used in the Energy Storage Solutions program. These mechanisms encourage serious, ready-to-build projects to move forward, particularly given persistent interconnection challenges. Next slide, please. On to our last topic, contract length. The Green Bank supports contract terms that align with typical useful life of storage systems. Longer-term contracts provide more revenue certainty for developers, which could possibly translate into lower required incentive levels because of the contract certainty. In short, longer contracts help balance program cost effectiveness and private sector participation, which these projects likely need in order to be more viable. Next slide, please. That concludes our presentation. Thank you to Pura for this opportunity to share today.
Thanks, Green Bank, for the presentation. I'll hand it over to Mr. Arpin for some questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'd like to thank the Connecticut Green Bank for their time and presentation today. Mr. Bumpin, could you please turn to slide 3? So my first question, and this is similar to a question that I'd asked the EDCs during their presentation. If FTM storage allocations were not designated on an EDC-specific basis, how would the associated program costs be allocated among the EDCs? And is there a potential risk that one EDC could bear a disproportionate share of the program's cost while the resulting grid benefits are distributed across both EDC service territories?
Good question. In the ESS program, and Sergio, feel free to jump in at any point. I believe that the costs are recovered by megawatts deployed on an annual basis. And so that might make it a little bit tougher to project out what those EDC cost recovery amounts might look like. But that's how the ESS program is doing that currently at the moment.
Yeah, I would only add that if the benefits provided by the FTM system can be measured, right, and they're how those benefits are distributed among the two utilities, maybe that could be a way to do the allocation, the cost allocation.
Thank you for that response. Do you have any insights into how those benefits would be estimated across the EDCs?
That would be the role of the BCAs. I would think that is the good starting point.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to turn to slide 4, please. So my first question, could the Green Bank please elaborate on the rationale for requesting a protective order for certain FTM storage data fields? Specifically, could the Green Bank please identify the specific types of data at issue and explain why protection may be necessary?
Yeah, so I don't believe it's any commonly collected information. I believe it's something specific for FTM front-of-the-meter storage systems. Sergio, I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but I could get that information.
Yes, I think developers mentioned cost data, right? That would be very sensitive, particularly in a market that would be incredibly competitive. So they would be probably apprehensive to share that information publicly. And the other factor was on I think on the revenues portion, right? That which would be how they or actual battery performance data, because that would um, make public the way they're making money. They're managing their assets to make money. That's their competitive advantage, and they seem to be reluctant or apprehensive to releasing some of that information.
Okay, thank you for that response. Now, staying on this slide, and the Green Bank may have touched on this a little during their presentation, but would the Green Bank recommend that some ESS program data requirements not be included in a future FTM storage program? If so, could the Green Bank please identify those data points and explain the rationale for excluding them?
Yeah, I think this was previously mentioned by Eversource and UI. Perhaps the low to moderate income data requirement might not be applicable, but certainly the underserved community could be. That could also just be something that the program admins, whoever admins the program, would be able to just match that data up separately, because you would know which town a system is installed in. And so that could just be a separate data point rather than gathering that data point from the developer, based on an application or however they'll be submitting their applications.
Okay, thank you for that response, Ms. Pine. Now, I'd like to turn to slide 5, please. Would the Green Bank be able to recommend specific values or fee structure for application fees and or performance assurance fees under a proposed FTM storage program?
I don't have anything specific, but we could take that back to the team and share at a later time if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Ms. Pine. Now I would like to turn to slide 6, please. Does the Green Bank have a recommended contract term or duration for an FTM storage program, such as 10 years, 20 years, et cetera? And if so, could the Green Bank please provide justification for the suggested contract length?
Yeah, I think we're in alignment with OCC's recommendation, which was somewhere between 10 and 20 years. In thinking more about what Logan had presented around the lifespan of the storage equipment, that could be another consideration. If it's an out of the box and there's some sort of spec sheet, perhaps incorporating that into the contract length to know, all right, the expected life of this specific item is 15 years. Maybe the contract is a little bit shorter than that, but that would probably be something that program admins and developers could work together to come up with.
Thank you for that response. Now I have another question that doesn't deal with a specific slide, and I believe that the Green Bank touched on this in their interrogatory responses. But could the Green Bank please speak to the potential risk of market saturation from additional FTM storage projects participating in ISO New England markets? Specifically, how might these affect revenue projections and impact the participant cost test score for FTM storage projects?
That is a question that I am wondering if Jim from SCA might be able to weigh in on, and if not, we could provide a correspondence with some additional insight.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what we've identified as in terms of the revenue stream that gets saturated the most quickly and possibly is the least reliable is frequency regulation and things like that. But I think functionally, you know, financiers tend to discount that revenue, and so ultimately it is, yeah, I think largely other sources of revenue are the ones that are going to be most largely relied upon, and if monetized, best dealt with for ratepayers. It's just not as big of a contribution. I think that what gets saturated tends to be those sources.
Okay, thank you for that response. I was wondering if there are any developers on the call right now that would also like to speak to that question of the potential risk of market saturation from additional FTM storage projects and how that might affect future revenue projections for FTM storage.
I can weigh in there if that's all right. This is Julian Boggs, Director of State Policy for Key Capture Energy, developer, owner, operator of standalone storage systems. That is not our primary concern at all, I will say, is the market saturation in ISO New England. We have not yet seen any large-scale battery storage systems deployed in ISO New England. The industry is facing significant headwinds on a number of fronts, and most recently significant federal policy fronts. And I think the lack of deployment is much a much greater concern than any saturation looking across the ISO New England states, not just Connecticut.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Boggs. Would that be like a concern then later on, like in the future, like 10 years from now, or is that too uncertain?
It's pretty uncertain. Certainly, there is a point at which battery storage can, eat its own revenues, and sometimes we see that most clearly in the ELCC, the capacity accreditation, effective load carrying capability ratings that we get from ISO New England. That decline significantly as more energy storage is added to the grid. However, those can go back up as more solar and other intermittent resources are added to the grid, as can the energy arbitrage revenues, which again is a place where quote unquote too many storage on the grid would eat its own revenues. I will say a place where we might see that the soonest is the frequency regulation market, which is, shallower in ISO New England, but it sounds like, and I think for good reason, the SEA didn't include revenues from the frequency regulation market. And those revenues would also, I think, be heavily limited by the WDAT tariff itself, because the WDAT, really focuses charging and discharging during certain hours. And those might not be the same hours in which frequency regulation is needed. So I think that would be another complication with including frequency regulation revenues. But those resources could provide frequency regulation. It would just, likely saturate again far quicker than capacity and energy markets.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Boggs. That was very helpful. And now I'd like to thank the Green Bank again for their presentation and time today. And those are all my questions. So I turn it back to you, Commissioner Arconti.
Thank you, Mr. Arpin. I'd like to open the floor again for some questions from stakeholders. If there are any, use the raise hand function, and I'll calling you as I see them pop up. Not seeing anyone pop, so I'll ask Commissioner Garen if he has any questions before we move on to public comment.
No questions. Let's go to public comment.
Alrighty, moving right along. So any members of the public that wishes to make comments here, please again use the raise hand function and we'll call on you as we see them. Yes, Mr. Boggs.
Uh, Thanks again. Again, Julian Boggs, Key Capture Energy. I just wanted to comment a little bit on this issue of maturity requirements and competitive procurement versus a first ready for served incentive that was discussed a little bit earlier. Key Capture Energy, as a little bit of context, has a number of quite mature late stage projects in Connecticut that we have been investing in for a number of years, anticipating, as sort of was implied in earlier dockets, that Pura would create a program for front of the meter energy storage facilities that participate in wholesale markets. And so we have 4 projects that have received permits from the Connecticut Siting Council, and as well that have cleared the ISO New England capacity market and have capacity supply obligations and are well on the way through the interconnection process. So we have made those investments as assuming that there was a program, and we had it's developer risk to advance a project without a program short on horizon or the guarantee of an incentive. And I think there was that discussion earlier, is like developers make bets all the time, and that's kind of the life of a developer, and that's why it's appropriate to have third-party developers that can take on that risk, and ratepayers don't. And if we fail, then that's no skin off ratepayers' back. But I just want to point out that today we are in an extremely different industry environment that we were certainly when Key Capture and many of the other industry companies here started developing projects in the state, but even than we were a year and a half ago. I think everybody is aware of the significant federal uncertainty with major policy that can impact our costs. But even prior to that, interest rates and the cost of capital, as well as a number of other policy changes like the increased capital requirements in the wholesale interconnection process for other larger scale projects that we're developing, where FERC is requiring ever increasing upfront fees to invest, has significantly restricted the amount of capital that companies that like ours have to invest in states. And as opposed to a situation where a number of years ago, everybody was developing everywhere. People were just, we were excited about a program, let's put something in. Companies like ours are exiting states left and right, and killing projects left and right, and are no longer making as many investments, based on a hope and a prayer of a future program, and have learned to be a lot more disciplined and focused with our revenue. So we have significant concerns, and our projects being a very it's sort of a unique situation in that we made these early investments in a different environment, but we would have significant concerns about a program that was didn't have these maturity, had a program that doesn't have the certainty at the end. And certainly a competitive solicitation, while appropriate, I think, and probably necessary for like the really large scale transmission connected projects, would at this time, I think, really damper the enthusiasm for investments in a distribution scale program. So I just wanted to add those color comments. We support comments made by the Alliance for Climate Transition and Renew, in this docket, and previously submitted comments, but just wanted to add that today, since there had been, I think, the good conversation earlier with the utilities on the pros and cons of that chicken and the egg situation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boggs, for your comments. It's good to see you again. All right, anybody else? Great. Okay, not seeing any. So we're gonna call it here today. I want to thank the EDCs and the Green Bank for their presentations. Thanks to staff for all the great questions. Thanks for all stakeholders for participating and joining us this morning. And thanks to my colleagues as well. So keep your eyes out for future interogs from the authority on this docket. And I'm not sure of immediate next steps, so we'll just leave it there for now and have a